I've come to say very crazy things tonight. I've come to talk about not the abduction phenomenon. I've talked that to death already. What I'm going to talk about is sort of some things happening in the abduction phenomenon. I brought some slides with me. I'll dispense with them. I'll show them very quickly, and then I'll get into what I want to talk about. But I figured you'd want to see some slides anyway. I want to thank, incidentally, MUFON LA and MUFON Orange County for sponsoring me to come out, because it's from Philadelphia where I live, and it's a long trip. And Steve Murillo in particular, and Jamie Hunter, and everybody else who made it possible. Well, the abduction phenomenon is something that it's unusual. Let's just say that. It's not something that I ever expected to be interested in when I first started out working in this subject. Oh, thank you. It's not something that I ever dreamed that I would spend most of my life after 1981 looking at. And what I found was even less reliable, less of something that I thought I would find when I began to research this subject. Now, I'm assuming that everybody here pretty much knows that abductions, people say that they're being abducted, and they talk about what it is that is happening to them, and they know that people are taken on board an object, and everybody knows, I'm assuming, that there's an examination. You know, people are put on a table, they're closely removed, they're put on a table, and this has happened to them, and that happens to them, and this happens to them, and that happens to them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If nobody has heard of that, I would be surprised. That's all over the place. And for a long time, we concentrated on what I just said. In other words, we had for us a model, and it was the model of Barney and Betty Hill. This is a case that happened in 1961, and it came to public attention in 1967. There were a couple who were traveling through New Hampshire on their way to Portsmouth late at night. Their car was stopped. They were taken on board an object. They were given physical examinations and released. And our assumption then was, yes, that makes some sort of sense, because if we were to do that on another planet, and if what they are saying was not just some sort of figment of their imagination or whatever, that's what, you know, that fit a sort of model of study, experiment, a learning situation. You find somebody, you say, there's one, get him. You grab him, you pull his legs off, you see what's inside. Hey, that's what you do. The model is the experiment. And this is a model that I used and that I labored under. And all researchers use that model. And if you read Secret Life, in the back of my mind, I still have that model in the book. The evidence did not hold for that. We could not sustain the evidence for that. The evidence just plain wasn't there. Now we have learned that, and when I say we, you have to understand I'm using the royal we. Oftentimes, I mean I. And so you'll have to just take that for what it's worth. But what we've learned is that an examination of a person is never the reason for an abduction. How's that? It's not just that it's something that happens all the time. It's never there's always some other reason for an abduction. It might take place during what we think is an examination phase, but it's not the reason. And when we looked at this phenomenon more and more, we began to understand that this simply was not an experiment. It wasn't a learning situation. They weren't trying to find out what makes us tick. This was a program. There was an assembly line kind of quality to it. There was a situation where they were just getting people in, doing whatever they were going to do to them, and then getting them out, one after another, over and over and over and over and over again, all night, all day, all through the United States, all through Western Europe, all through Latin America, and probably in every other major country in the world too, although I can't guarantee that. Well, as a program, That means that it has a beginning, we would assume, a middle, and an end, because a program generally is goal-directed. In other words, there's a reason why they're doing it. And so when I wrote The Threat, I wrote about the program involved with this phenomenon. And rather than going through all the aspects of the abduction phenomenon, what I want to talk about is sort of the reproductive aspects of it to a degree. Now, not totally and completely, but to a degree. And so what we'll do is take a look at some of what happens during typical abductions. And what I want to do is move forward. Move forward is move forward. I want to move forward. There we go. And we know that women say routinely that eggs are extracted from them, that this is something that is common. It's common for every woman who has ovaries intact. We don't really see a whole lot of exceptions to that. I'm sure there are exceptions to it, but it's extremely common. And harvesting eggs. All of these are drawings by abductees. What I want you to look at here also is, you'll notice in this room, it's a circular room, and there are archways. Notice that there's no doors. They're not squared off. These are tables. You notice that they just sort of come right down. Now, what they've done here is they've made an edge to the table. And when you ask them about this edge, there really isn't one most of the time. It's just part of the floor as they describe it. And that's what she's laying on here as well. And here are our old friends, standard gray aliens. And I just want you to keep this sort of table in mind, and as you'll see as we go along. Next. Forward. There we go. Is this number 2? I guess so. Here is a sperm collection procedure. Here's a guy who's laying on one of these tables. You'll notice a curved room and a round. And this is a situation where sperm is being taken, and he is comforted by an abductee, a non-alien, an abductee, which I found of no concern whatsoever when I saw this and when he told me about it. Later, I became interested in this. So they take sperm, we know that, all the time. In fact, Barney Hill in 1961 said that they had taken a sperm sample, but when a book was written about them in 1966, to our amazing luck, he refused to have that put in because it was so embarrassing. He didn't want people to know. And that was hugely important to us because nobody knew that this had happened to Barney, and people started describing it all the time, and nobody could be accused of picking it up from the Barney and Betty Hill story early on. See what I mean? It wasn't mentioned, but it's in the testimony. Here is Smurf's action with neural engagement. One of the things that I discovered was this is a totally different person. You'll notice that the same kind of table. And one of the things that I discovered was this oddity of neural engagement. I'm going to walk away from the podium, if that's okay. And the oddity is, I was doing a session with a person once, and she says, so she had flown with angels, and I think I talk about this a little bit in one of those books. And I wanted to take a look and see what had happened, and it was very difficult. And finally, she realizes that the angel she was looking at is not an angel at all. He's an angel, but he's small, he's gray, he's thin, he's bald. That's the angel, you know. And so they take her on board this object. This is her, that to her, this to her, that to her. And I come across a situation where they give her a piece of paper, she says. Whether this is true or not, I'm not sure. And I said, well, what's on the paper? She says, a series of boys' names. I'm supposed to memorize the names. I said, okay. Having never heard anything like this before, and this is like 1988, and I'd only started doing my own hypnosis in 86, so I still had no idea. Nobody knew anything about this phenomenon, really. I mean, even my colleague Bud Hopkins and I were still very much in the dark about what was going on. And so I said, are you memorizing the names? She said, no. I said, well, what are you doing? Well, I'm sort of looking around a little bit, although she wasn't looking around, whatever. Then I was just stumped. What do I ask next? She's standing there. She's not doing what she's supposed to be doing. So I had no idea what question. So I came up with a question. The question was, well, what is this guy who brought you into the room, this alien, what is he doing? Oh, she said, he's looking at me. I said, okay, well, where is he looking? You know, he's looking at my eyes. I said, well, how close is he to you? And she said, well, he's right there. He's a couple inches away, right on the side. Which was not the answer that I expected. I mean, obviously they're going to be looking at her. I mean, they don't want her to start running down the hallway or whatever it is. I mean, they're obviously going to be looking at her. So, but it was so surprising. I couldn't imagine what was happening here or why this was happening. So I started to ask, when this came up, I began to ask people who were lying on a table, you know, well, what's he doing now? And they'll say, well, he's looking at me. And then you come to the standard leading them away questions. Well, is he looking at your foot, you mean? Is he looking at your knees? Or, well, you know, is he, you know, no, he's looking at my head. Well, is he looking at your chin, your ear? These are direct, misleading questions. And no, he's looking at my eyes. Well, how close is he to you? Oh, his forehead is touching mine, you know, or he's an inch away, or something like that. Sort of like what you see here. And the question is, what in the hell is this? What does this mean? How do you deal with this, huh? Now, everybody is saying that. I learned you just have to ask the proper questions, and out it comes every time. I mean, now where I'm dealing with this, it quickly gets to, like, I've got 10 instances of it, 20 instances, and then the next thing you know, I've got 700 instances of it or more. I've looked at 1,100 different abduction events. And it's just a normal feature of this phenomenon. And my sense was, ultimately, is that they're hooking into the optic nerve. And there's a lot of reason to think that they're doing this. And because the optic nerve is the only nerve that you can see from the outside. You can see it in the back of your retina. And it goes directly to the brain. And they can use it as a conduit to innervate whatever other neurological sites that they have in their mind. So people will describe them sort of images coming up that they can describe. The people will say, well, I'll say, well, the key question here is, well, what's going on in your mind, which is something I stumbled on later on. What's going on in your mind while this is happening? And they'll say, well, there's sexual response going on, which leads to egg-taking procedures or sperm-taking procedures. They're looking at memories that happened to me, things that happened to me in the last couple of weeks. Or I'm seeing a comb, I'm seeing a table leg, I'm seeing a shoe, I'm seeing a tree, I'm seeing a walnut, I'm seeing a ballpoint pen, or whatever, and you know that they're just going through these neural pathways, and you get these flashes of images that are just going right into. And I used to think there was some significance to this, that I was trying to put the pieces together. What does all this mean? What are they looking at? And the answer is nothing. It doesn't mean anything. It just means that you can see them going through the neural pathways, firing these images off, looking for a specific site. And that's sort of what's happening here. Now, it's important to sort of remember this. This is a sperm collection procedure. Here's guys on the standard table. This is a machine that has a hose attached to it right here. I did not bring in my other drawings of this same machine. I have them. When an egg, sometimes an embryo is extracted from a woman. First, an embryo is placed in a woman. I'm getting ahead of myself here a little bit. And all they know is that they feel pregnant one time. Now, feeling pregnant and going through a certain procedure which leads to pregnancy are two different things. One can go through that procedure which leads to pregnancy with your boyfriend, let's just say, and feeling pregnant makes sense. Feeling pregnant just because you feel pregnant means you're not pregnant, because something has to happen first, see? But as we all know here, if you know anything about the abduction phenomenon, these people are pregnant. And they think to themselves, what in the hell? How could this possibly be happening? You know, what do you mean, pregnant? They can't be pregnant. And then after about 10 weeks, you get a little embryo removal procedure, and suddenly, false alarm, they weren't pregnant after all. Never mind. This is extremely important, as we will see. Now people are taken into rooms, and they're shown fetuses that have been removed from them. Not from each individual, obviously, but from various abductees in different stages of development, although you can't quite tell from here, although some of these look smaller than ones over here, for example. This is one room. I called it an incubatorium, and I was overly proud of myself for inventing this term. And then I looked it up one day, and it's an old word. It's already been invented by somebody. And deflation was me. Then here's another one. These are in sort of tubular structures, all suspended in liquid. See a small one here and larger ones here, a tiny one there, and so forth, from a different person altogether. Notice the arches and all that. Now, sometimes, and Bud Hopkins first discovered this, and a lot of other things that we're talking about, what you have is a baby that's sort of grown up and looks like a strange sort of combination of alien and human. And once again, I've written about this extensively in my books. And one of the ones that looks more alien than anything else is usually a caretaker who presents a baby to a woman or to a man. And if it's a woman, she might have to hold the baby, she might have to feed the baby, she might have to touch the baby. If it's a man, he does the same thing except for feeding the baby, obviously. And here's sort of where they sit to nurse.